WBC is categorized into two types on the basis of presence or absence of granules. So the two types are granulocyte and agranulocyte. Granulocyte contains granulo, which refers to granules, and cyte means cells. So granulocytes are those white blood cells that contain granules. Granules are filled with enzymes that the WBCs secrete. That depends on the type of WBC we are talking about or the type of granulocyte we are talking about. Next is agranulocyte, which contains A. A means there's absence of granule in that particular site, or the WBCs under agranulocytes are without granules. Granulocyte is also known as polymorphonuclear leukocyte. Quite a large name, isn't it, for granulocyte, but contains very simple parts within it. Just break the huge name and that way you will understand easily. So polymorphonuclear leukocyte. Look at the parts. There's poly, which means multiple. Morpho, which means morphology or form. Nuclear refers to nucleus, and leukocyte means white blood cell. So granulocytes are those leukocyte or white blood cells that contain nucleus of multiple forms. That's what the term means. Poly means multiple, morpho means morphology or form, nuclear refers to nucleus, and leukocyte means WBC. This is the another name for granulocytes. So basically it means to say that granulocyte are those leukocyte that contains nucleus of different shapes and sizes. There are nucleus that are multi-lobed, nucleus that are bi-lobed, nucleus that look like sunglasses, nucleus that look like the letter S. So since there's presence of various or different types of nucleus, nucleus of different forms and morphology, nucleus of multiple forms or morphology, the leukocytes are called so. By that I mean granulocyte are also called polymorphonuclear leukocyte. That you will come to know after I draw the diagrams of different types of leukocytes. Let's look at the different type of granulocytes. Under granulocyte, there are three types of WBCs. First, in this granulocyte, the nucleus that is present is multi-lobed. Here's one lobe, which is connected to another lobe, which is connected to another lobe. There are three lobes in total in this particular diagram that I have shown. Since the nucleus is multi-lobed, this particular WBC can be identified as being which granulocyte? Neutrophil. This particular granulocyte is neutrophil. So neutrophil, they have multi-lobed nucleus or nucleus having multiple lobes. Neutrophil, break the word. Neutro means neutral and phil means love. What does this mean? This means that neutrophils are those granulocytes that love both acidic and basic dyes equally. That its love is impartial. It loves both acidic and basic dyes equally or the same. That means the cell itself contains granules, and the granules present are both acidic, which I'm showing with red color, as well as basic, which I'm gonna show with blue color. So acidic granules are those granules that when stained with acidic dye imparts a red coloration when viewed or observed under a microscope. Similarly, basic granules are those granules found in granulocyte which imparts blue coloration when observed under a microscope when stained with a basic dye. Since neutrophil stains weakly with both acidic and basic dyes. It's been given the name neutrophil because its love is same towards acidic and basic dyes. Since it shows positive stain towards both acidic and basic dyes, obviously it contains both acidic and basic granules. Together, under a microscope, when observed, it would look purplish in color. Third is function. The function of neutrophil is phagocytosis. So whenever a pathogen or a foreign particle enters your body, firstly, the soldiers of the body are sent to fight against it. And the soldiers that are sent, firstly, at the very beginning of infection, those soldiers are neutrophils. These neutrophils, they engulf the pathogen and kill it. Next point, number. The number of neutrophil increases than the normal number during intense exercise and during pregnancy. That is the reason why exercise is very much essential for your general health or for your immune system. The more you exercise, the better your immunity. Because you can see a proper proof right here itself. When you exercise, the number of neutrophil in the body increases. And what are neutrophils? Neutrophils are nothing but the soldiers that are fighting against pathogens in your body or providing immunity to your body. That's how exercise increases your immunity or the power to resist against pathogens and diseases. Second, pregnancy. During pregnancy, a woman has to face a lot of stress, not just mental stress as well as physical stress. During this stressful time, in order to protect the body, the number of neutrophil in a pregnant woman increases. And this particular condition, where the number of neutrophil is more than the normal number, that particular condition is known as neutrophilia. Okay. Let's look at the second granulocyte. In this second granulocyte, when you observe it under a microscope, you see that the nucleus that is present has two lobes connected with the help of a handle-like structure. And this particular cell with nucleus having two lobes is known as acidophil, or it's also known as eosinophil. So the nucleus that is present is bilobed. That is, it has two lobes and it looks like sunglasses. Let me put it on. Here's the ear of the cell. And as Eric Cartman from South Park would say, so the cell or granulocyte with bilobed nucleus is your acidophil or eosinophil. Let's break it the same way we broke neutrophil. Acidophil, it contains the part acido and phil. Acido refers to acid and phil refers to love. So these cells, they love acidic dyes. Since they love acidic dyes, they obviously contain acidic granules. These acidic granules, when stained with the help of acidic dyes, impart red color. And the acidic dye that is used for staining this particular cell is called eosin. That's why it's also known as eosinophil. That is, it loves the dye eosin. So since it contains acidic granules that is stained with the help of acidic dye, it's called acidophil, and the acidic dye which is used to stain it is called eosin, so also called eosinophil. So it stains strongly with acidic dye. Let me write with, otherwise you will get confused. Okay, with acidic dye, and this particular acidic dye that is used is eosin. That's why it's called eosinophil. The function, it mediates inflammation. Whenever there is allergy, whenever an allergen enters your body and causes allergy, inflammation occurs, and that particular inflammation is mediated with the help of eosinophil. So whenever there is allergic reaction, the number of eosinophil in your body increases. Which brings us to next point, that is number. So number increases when there's allergy, During allergy, inflammation occurs, and that inflammation is mediated by eosinophil or acidophil. So the number of eosinophil or acidophil has to increase above the baseline. Second is during asthma and also during infection. During these particular conditions, the number of eosinophil or acidophil becomes more than the normal number, and that particular condition is known as eosinophilia. Thirdly, there's your cell, and when you observe it under a microscope, you'll find that the nucleus of this cell is shaped like the alphabet or the letter S. And this particular granulocyte is called basophil, where the nucleus is S-shaped. Again, break the word. It contains the part baso and phil. Baso refers to basic and phil refers to love. So this particular cell loves basic dye. That is, it gets stained with a basic dye. That means it contains basic granules, which when gets stained with the help of basic dye imparts blue color. So these are your basic granules that is imparting blue color under a microscope when stained with the basic dye. So it stains strongly with basic dye. That's why it's also called basophil. It loves base. Its function is same as that of mast cells that I have already mentioned under the topic of connective tissue. That is, it is secretory in function. What do they secrete? They secrete, number one, histamine. Histamine brings about inflammation, so it is inflammatory. Number two, serotonin. Serotonin is antagonistic to histamine, that is, it is anti-inflammatory, so it inhibits inflammation or reduces inflammation. Not only that, in human body, serotonin is also present in the form of neurotransmitter, which you'll come to know under the topic of nervous system. And thirdly, heparin. Heparin is anticoagulant, that is, it prevents blood clotting in blood vessels. And the condition where the number of basophil is more than the normal number is called basophilia. The same way we would call the number of neutrophil being more neutrophilia and the number of eosinophil more than normal number eosinophilia. This is it for granulocyte or the WBCs with granules. Now let's move to agranulocyte. Agranulocyte are those WBCs that don't contain any granules. Under agranulocyte, there are two types of WBCs present. The first WBC, when observed under a microscope, looks humongous as compared to other WBCs. And the nucleus present inside of it looks like a kidney or a bean. This particular agranulocyte is called monocyte. So the nucleus is kidney or bean shaped. Let's break the word. It contains mono, that means single, and cyte, that means cell. So it's a single cell with kidney or bean shaped nucleus. And the cell, as you can compare from other diagrams, it's the largest WBC. What's the function of monocyte? Monocyte, they differentiate and form macrophages. What are macrophages? Macro means large, phase means that shows phagocytosis. So these are nothing but very large phagocytic cells. What do? They do the function same as neutrophil. But neutrophil are the soldiers that are first sent during infection. When neutrophil can't do its job, then the second soldiers, which are the macrophages, are sent, which are much more stronger and much more larger. There are various types of macrophages found in different parts of your body. Let me mention few. There's your dust cells found in the alveoli of lungs. And then there's your Kupffer cells, which are found in liver. There's microglia or microglial cells found in brain or nervous system. Osteoclast found in bone. And then there's your histiocytes, which are found in connective tissue. These are the various types of monocytes found in different parts of the body. All of them have the same function or similar function. Then there's your second type of agranulocyte, which when observed under a microscope has a spherical nucleus. And the name of this agranulocyte is lymphocyte. So the nucleus is spherical. Break the word. Lympho refers to lymph and cyte refers to cells. So these cells are found in lymph and they are also produced by lymphoid tissue or lymph nodes. As you can compare the size of this cell with other cells, you can easily see that lymphocyte, they are the smallest WBCs. Smallest WBC. Next, function. Now, the function of lymphocyte varies on the basis of which lymphocyte we are talking about, because lymphocyte itself is of two types. So here's your bone. This bone contains bone marrow cavity, inside of which there's your bone marrow. Bone marrow goes through the process of hemopoiesis or leukopoiesis and forms blood cells or WBCs. Out of these WBCs, under a granulocyte, we have lymphocyte. If the lymphocyte, it matures and differentiates within the bone marrow, then that's B cell or B lymphocyte. But if this particular lymphocyte comes out of the bone marrow, enters an endocrine gland named thymus, and then matures there, then that's your T cell or T lymphocyte. Let me explain you better. So there's your bone marrow where the lymphocyte is being produced. If that particular lymphocyte matures within the bone marrow, then that's your B cells. What's the function of B cells? They produce antibodies. Antibodies. And immunoglobulin proteins found in your blood, those are nothing but antibodies. There's your immunoglobulin Z, immunoglobulin A, immunoglobulin M, immunoglobulin E, immunoglobulin D. All these various types will come under the topic of immune system. But for now, you got to understand that these B cells, which is a type of lymphocyte, these B lymphocyte, they produce antibodies. And antibodies are responsible for humoral immunity. Why humoral immunity? Because these proteins or antibodies, they are found in your blood, lymph, etc. And blood, lymph are the fluid present in your body. And fluid means humor. Since the immunity is obtained from the humor or the fluid, it's called humoral immunity. Second, T cells. So here's your thymus gland, which is an endocrine gland. You will know that in the topic of endocrine system. This thymus gland, it produces hormone called thymosin. This thymosin hormone tells the cells to come out, go into the thymus, and then mature or differentiate there. And those particular lymphocytes that come out of the bone marrow and matures within the thymus are your T cells. Once it gets matured, it forms various types, such as your helper T cells, killer T cells, etc. There are other types as well. Since thymus is where the T cells differentiate and mature, it's also known as the training school of T cells. And these T cells, they are responsible for which immunity? They are responsible for cell-mediated immunity. The reason, because helper T cells, killer T cells, they are cells, and their function is to form the immune system of human body. Since the immunity is being gained with the help of cells, that particular immunity is known as cell-mediated immunity. And that's it for the types of WBCs. There's one more thing that you gotta remember, that is TLC stands for total leukocyte count. That means in blood, the total number of white blood cells present is your TLC, which is 5,000 to 10,000 per cubic millimeter. But there's another term called DLC, which means differential leukocyte count. This is your total number of WBC present in your body. This is the number of WBC depending on the type. That is, WBC itself are of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 types. And these 5 types have their own number, right? And that particular number written separately is your differential leukocyte count. That is the number of neutrophil, the number of eosinophil, the number of basophil, the number of monocyte, and the number of lymphocyte. That comes under differential leukocyte count. And by comparing the differential leukocyte count, you can see which is present in maximum number and which is present in minimum number. And the series is something like this. NEB, NLMEB. Either remember it as NEB, or you could remember it as being never let monkeys eat banana. You can remember any way you want. N stands for neutrophil, L stands for lymphocyte, M stands for monocyte, E stands for eosinophil, and B stands for basophil. So the largest number is of neutrophil and the least number is of basophil. So this is the descending order of the DLC of different types of WBCs. When the number of monocyte is more than the normal number, that's monocytosis. And when the number of lymphocyte is more than the normal number, that's lymphocytosis. And that's it for this topic. Let me revise it for you. So there are various types of WBCs present in human body. On the basis of presence or absence of WBC, on the basis of presence or absence of granules, there are 2 types of WBC. There's your granulocyte, where granules are present, and agranulocyte, where granules are absent. Granulocyte is also called polymorphonuclear leukocyte because these include those WBCs that contain nucleus of different forms. That is, when you look at the different types of granulocyte, you can see that depending on the type of granulocyte, the type of nucleus or the form of nucleus is different as well. Under granulocyte, you have 3 types. There's your neutrophil, which contains a multi-lobed nucleus, and it has both basic and acidic granules, the function of which is phagocytosis, and the number of neutrophil increases when you exercise and during pregnancy. Second is acidophil or eosinophil, which contains bilobed nucleus, which looks like sunglasses. They contain acidic granules, and the function of eosinophil or acidophil is to mediate inflammation during allergic reaction, the number of which increases during allergy, asthma, infection. Third granulocyte is basophil, which contains acid nucleus, and the granules present are basic granules. They are secretory in function, that is, they secrete histamine, which is inflammatory, serotonin, which is anti-inflammatory, and heparin, which is an anticoagulant. Then under agranulocyte, there are 2 types of WBC. There's your monocyte, which is the largest WBC that contains kidney or bean-shaped nucleus, the function of which is to show phagocytosis by forming macrophages. And secondly, there's your lymphocyte, which are the smallest WBCs that contain large spherical shaped nucleus. Lymphocytes, if they mature within the bone marrow, they are B cells or B lymphocytes that produce antibodies and form the humoral immune system of human body. If these lymphocytes, they come out and then mature within the thymus, that's your T lymphocyte that forms the cell-mediated immune system of human body, because the cells are responsible to provide immunity in this particular condition. And that's it. Bye.